The Middle East is once again on the brink. For decades, Iran and Israel fought a shadow war, proxies, cyber attacks, covert strikes. But in 2025, that war erupted into open conflict. Missiles rain down, air raid sirens blare, and the world watches as two regional powers clash, threatening global stability. To understand this crisis, we must look back to the pivotal Iranian Revolution of 1979. Before 1979, Iran and Israel were quiet, strategic partners, sharing intelligence and trade under the Shah's pro-Western rule. But the Islamic Revolution changed everything. Iran's new theocracy branded Israel an enemy, handed its embassy to the PLO, and made anti-Israel policy central. Tehran began supporting militant proxies like Hezbollah, launching a shadow war that still shapes the Middle East today. As Iran's opposition to Israel hardened, the nuclear race became the conflict's most dangerous front. Israel, fearing an existential threat, has fought to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons through sabotage, cyber attacks, and targeted assassinations. Meanwhile, Iran built a powerful network of proxies across the Middle East, encircling Israel with threats from Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, and Yemen. This shadow war has made direct confrontation seem almost inevitable. In autumn 2024, years of covert conflict erupted into open war. After a series of high-stakes assassinations, Iran launched Operation True Promise 2, an unprecedented barrage of missiles and drones directly at Israel. The world watched as air defenses lit up the night sky. Though most attacks were intercepted, some struck military targets, shattering the old rules. The shadow war was over. A new era of direct confrontation had begun. After Iran's unprecedented missile strike in October 2024, the region entered a volatile new phase. Iran's proxies, including the Houthis, escalated attacks, targeting Israel's vital infrastructure. A missile aimed at Ben Gurion Airport was intercepted, but the threat was clear. Israel realized defense alone was unsustainable and began planning a preemptive strike. Operation Rising Lion was set in motion, aiming to cripple Iran's nuclear and military capabilities. The stage was set for a historic confrontation. On June 13, 2025, the conflict erupted into open war as Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a sweeping air assault deep into Iran. Israeli jets struck Iran's most sensitive nuclear sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, as well as IRGC command centers and missile factories. The world awoke to explosions in Tehran and other major cities, signaling a new, devastating phase. Iran's leadership, humiliated and wounded, faced a direct attack on its core assets. The question was no longer if Iran would retaliate, but how severe the response would be. Iran answered swiftly, launching hundreds of missiles and drones at Israeli cities. Air raid sirens blared in Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Beersheba as Israeli defenses struggled to intercept the barrage. For the first time, Israeli cities suffered significant damage. Infrastructure burned, and civilians were caught in the crossfire. The psychological shock was immense. War had come to the heart of both nations. On June 17th, an Iranian missile struck Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba, injuring dozens and sparking global outrage. Iran claimed the hospital was near a military base, but images of a burning civilian facility dominated headlines. The attack was condemned as a war crime, escalating international pressure. The Rubicon was crossed. The war was now brutal, bloody, and personal. Civilian casualties mounted, and the world watched as the conflict spiraled. The stakes had never been higher, and the region braced for further escalation. The Iran-Israel war had become a catastrophic reality, with no end in sight. The strike on Soroka Hospital marked a turning point, forcing the United States to act. Washington, alarmed by Iran's attacks on civilians and the threat to regional stability, shifted from restraint to direct intervention. B-2 stealth bombers were deployed to Guam, signaling a new phase. On June 21st, the U.S. launched Operation Midnight Hammer, precision strikes with bunker-busting bombs on Iran's most fortified nuclear sites. Israel simultaneously hit Isfahan again, aiming to finish what it started. The joint US-Israeli assault aimed to cripple Iran's nuclear program once and for all. Iran, battered but defiant, retaliated with more missiles and drones, now targeting US assets as well as Israel. The conflict had escalated into a direct confrontation between Iran, Israel, and the world's superpower. The Middle East teetered on the edge of a wider, uncontrollable war. The world held its breath, fearing the next move could ignite a global crisis. The stakes were now existential for all sides. The war's outcome, and its cost, remained terrifyingly uncertain. Beneath the headlines, the war's true cost is measured in shattered lives. By June 22, hundreds were dead, Iranians and Israelis alike, with casualties rising by the hour. Cities became battlefields, homes and hospitals, targets. In Iran, airstrikes near urban centers caused mass panic and a desperate exodus from Tehran. Highways clogged with fleeing families, supplies dwindled, and fear spread faster than the bombs. In Israel, relentless missile barrages forced civilians into shelters, shattering any sense of safety. Children grew up overnight, traumatized by sirens and explosions. Infrastructure on both sides, power, transport, hospitals, lay in ruins. The attack on Soroka Medical Center became a symbol of the war's brutality, crippling care for the wounded. Humanitarian needs soared, but aid struggled to reach those trapped by violence. The psychological scars ran deep, especially among the young. The war's devastation extended far beyond the battlefield. Every statistic masked a story of loss, fear, and resilience. The Iran-Israel war was no longer about strategy. It was about survival. Civilians bore the brunt, their lives forever changed. The human tragedy was the war's most enduring legacy. The war unleashed a humanitarian crisis, with refugees flooding out of Tehran and other cities. Neighboring countries struggled to cope as aid agencies faced impossible demands. Delivering food, water, and medicine became a deadly challenge amid ongoing attacks. Both sides faced accusations of war crimes, strikes on hospitals, residential areas, and civilian infrastructure. The International Criminal Court launched investigations, threatening political and military leaders with prosecution. The legal and diplomatic fallout added new layers of complexity to the conflict. Health systems collapsed. Doctors and nurses worked in chaos, forced to make impossible choices. The Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders risked everything to help the wounded. Ordinary people paid the highest price, mourning, fleeing, and searching for safety. The war's central tragedy was not military, but human. Behind every headline were families torn apart and lives upended. The suffering was immense, the resilience remarkable. The world watched, but for millions, escape and relief remained out of reach. The Iran-Israel war ignited a regional firestorm, drawing in proxies and neighboring states. Iran's axis of resistance, Hezbollah, militias in Syria and Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen, opened new fronts. Syria became a battleground as Israel targeted Iranian positions, trying to cut supply lines to Hezbollah. In Lebanon, Hezbollah's rocket arsenal threatened northern Israel, forcing Israel to split its focus. The risk of a full-scale Israeli-Hezbollah war loomed, restraining both sides but keeping tensions high. The Houthis struck shipping in the Red Sea and launched missiles toward Israel, expanding the conflict's reach. Each front drained Israeli and allied resources, fulfilling Iran's goal of a multi-front war. The region became a web of interlinked crises. Strikes in Syria triggered rocket fire from Lebanon or drone attacks from Iraq. De-escalation seemed impossible as alliances and enmities overlapped. The war was no longer just Iran versus Israel, it was a regional contagion. Instability spread, threatening to outlast the fighting itself. The Middle East was now a battlefield with no clear boundaries. The consequences would echo long after the bombs stopped falling. The escalating war has drawn in global powers, each maneuvering to protect its interests. The US intervenes directly, sparking controversy at home and deepening divisions. Russia and China condemn Western actions, backing Iran diplomatically. European leaders scramble for diplomacy, fearing economic and humanitarian fallout. Underneath, sectarian divides fuel anxiety among Sunni Arab states, who quietly cooperate with Israel against Iran. The region's future now hangs in the balance, shaped by both global rivalry and ancient sectarian lines. The Iran-Israel war is not just a regional conflict, it's a global economic crisis in the making. The world's economy runs on oil, and a fifth of it flows through the Strait of Hormuz, now a flashpoint in this conflict. Oil prices have surged, fueling inflation and economic pain worldwide. From gas pumps in America to homes in Europe, everyday people feel the impact. The war has taken the global economy hostage, with the Strait of Hormuz as the pressure point. The greatest risk of this conflict is not just war, but the threat of nuclear catastrophe. Strikes on Iran's nuclear sites risk releasing radioactive material, creating clouds that could spread across borders. The region faces the specter of a Chernobyl-style disaster, with long-term health and environmental consequences. Such actions could trigger a new arms race, undermining decades of non-proliferation efforts and making the world less safe. War creates chaos, and chaos creates a vacuum. As the governments of Iran, Israel, and their allies focus their entire state apparatus on fighting each other, their attention is diverted from other critical threats. This is a golden opportunity for extremist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. These terrorist organizations, really thrive in lawlessness and instability. The regional turmoil provides them with the perfect breeding ground to regroup, recruit new followers, and plan attacks. With security forces stretched thin and borders becoming more porous, the power vacuum allows these groups to re-establish safe havens in the ungoverned spaces of Syria, Iraq, and even potentially within a destabilized Iran itself. The resurgence of these groups poses a direct threat not only to the Middle East, but to the entire world. A key part of the global security architecture since 9/11 has been a concerted international effort to counter terrorism. The current conflict, it just shatters that focus. Intelligence resources are redirected and military assets are repositioned, leaving the world more vulnerable to a surprise attack. ISIS, which was territorially defeated but never ideologically vanquished, could exploit the sectarian Sunni-Shia hatred inflamed by the war to rally support. A comeback for these extremist networks would mean a new wave of terror that could strike anywhere, from the markets of Baghdad to the capitals of Europe and North America. The economic fallout of the conflict extends far beyond the oil markets, threatening to cripple regional economies and trigger a massive humanitarian disaster. The widespread destruction of infrastructure in both Iran and Israel will take billions of dollars and many years to rebuild. The immediate effect is a collapse in economic activity, soaring unemployment, and the flight of capital. This economic desperation fuels instability and makes populations more susceptible to extremist ideologies. The massive displacement of people, with hundreds of thousands fleeing their homes, creates a severe humanitarian crisis that strains the resources of neighboring countries and international aid organizations, further destabilizing an already fragile region. Ultimately, the global consequences of the Iran-Israel war paint a grim picture of interconnected risk. What began as a shadow conflict between two regional rivals has metastasized into a crisis with worldwide implications. It threatens the world's energy supply, raises the specter of nuclear contamination, and creates fertile ground for the return of global terrorism. The economic and humanitarian fallout promises to be immense, creating waves of instability that will be felt for years to come. The world is now forced to confront the stark reality that in our interconnected age, a war between two nations in the Middle East is a war against global security and stability itself. As the dust settles from devastating conflict, the world stands at a crossroads. The next moves by leaders in Tehran, Tel Aviv, and Washington will shape the future of the Middle East and global stability. A violent containment strategy could become the new normal. Tit-for-tat strikes, civilians living in constant fear, and no end in sight. But the risk of miscalculation is immense. One spark could ignite a catastrophic regional war, drawing in global powers and leaving millions displaced. This is the abyss leaders are staring into, a future too terrible to contemplate, yet dangerously possible. Amidst the wreckage and rhetoric of war, a faint glimmer of hope remains: diplomacy. European and UN mediators push for a ceasefire, proposing a freeze, halting military action for a halt to Iran's nuclear activities. The United States, now a direct combatant, holds unique leverage to offer security and economic relief. The coming weeks will decide if this fragile hope can grow, or if the region plunges deeper into tragedy. From the 1979 Iranian Revolution to the open warfare of 2025, the conflict between Iran and Israel has erupted into a direct global crisis. The world now faces a dangerous new era, one where old rules no longer apply, and the stakes are higher than ever. The human cost is staggering, with countless lives lost and cities in ruins. The world watches, hoping for peace, knowing the path chosen now will shape generations to come. The future is unwritten, but the choices are starkly clear. The Middle East stands at a crossroads: diplomacy or deeper conflict. Leaders in Iran, Israel, and the US must choose between escalation and the hard work of peace. The stakes are immense: millions of lives, global stability, and the future itself. The world is watching. The path of diplomacy is narrow, but the road to war is wide. The choice will define our time.